Well, welcome. Got episode 3 here of the Playbook, and today we got Christian Vergara here. And Christian and I are going to talk about home ownership.
Yeah.
And so getting back to my wheelhouse here, and so I'm excited to answer your questions, talk a little bit about home ownership, what it means. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
great.
for sure.
I have some questions.
You do? Well,
looking for some answers.
Let's start with some questions. I love it.
So I'm probably going to completely botch this, but I remember hearing a quote.
I do that every episode.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Okay. Well, I heard this quote before about in the future, I'm paraphrasing it here, but in the future, many people are going to mainly rent and not own anything, and they're going to be okay with it. And I'm 24 years old. And I'm just kind of thinking about the economic climate, right? Like what's going on in the world, all these different things, like job availability. And I just feel like that people within my age or younger, this idea of owning a home, right? I don't know, maybe just me, but it's maybe a little bit harder to kind of grasp that idea.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that I know and people that are a little bit older than me are still renting.
Yep.
But that's just from my very limited perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for someone that's been in this industry in real estate for, very, very long time, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So when you heard that quote, did you take that as a good thing that people will be not owning things, or do you look at that as a negative?
That's a great question. I look at that as a negative.
A negative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you're 24 years old.
Yep.
Right? So here's the thing. Whenever we talk about home ownership, there's a lot of ifs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a question I get a lot is it a good time to buy a home?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a good time to buy a home if,
Mm-hmm.
so there's circumstances that go beyond, what the market is doing, and, are prices going up, are prices going down? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Making the decision to get into real estate, real estate should be a part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not your whole life. It shouldn't be your whole financial life. For a lot of people, it's a large chunk of their financial life. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important, the decisions that they make. So getting back to your question, I wouldn't give a blanket answer,
Right.
To that, or I don't even have any super in-depth thoughts about, my initial reaction is, we need to own things,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's America. It's, I feel like if you don't own things, then you're more easily controlled, or
Mm-hmm.
at the whims of, whatever's happening. I feel like ownership of a home provides stability for your family. It can provide a great financial resource for you in the future. So there are a lot of great reasons to own homes.
Mm-hmm.
But, at 24 years old, you're single or
Yeah, single.
single guy, 24 years old. Is it a good time for you to buy right now?
Mm-hmm.
That's where, what a good realtor will be able to do is talk to you about, your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
What are your plans? What's your situation right now? So there'd just be a lot of questions I have before we could get to the point where I would say, yeah, I think it's a good idea for you to buy a home.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through this with my daughter a couple years ago. One of the greatest experiences of my life, helping my daughter and her husband, plan out how home ownership fits
Mm-hmm.
into their life, right? Because one of the things that I thought was really cool is when we finished the whole process, I thought to myself, I didn't do anything different than I would have done with anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt kind of good about that. Being my daughter, obviously, I really cared about the decisions that she was making and what she was doing. But I wouldn't have done it different with you or any other young client,
Mm-hmm.
So, what we talked about was, again, what does her life look like right now, and what does she want real estate to do for her, in the totality of things, right?
Yeah.
So she was married. am pregnant and a dog, and our husband has a pretty steady job. Well, a very steady job, works for a great company, Coca-Cola, and Reyes Bottling Company. But so he's got a really solid job, right? So, okay, that's a good base, to start talking about home ownership, right? And then we talk about what do you want? What's your life going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I think that it's important that anybody who's considering buying a home is at least thinking in those terms. Now, we know things can change all the time, right? But in her mind's eye, I was trying to get to, like, where are you going, with your life? Where are you going to be in 5 years? What do you picture in 10 years, 20 years, things like that. So we set out a plan, because you can use home ownership to massively increase your net worth, right? If it's done right. Home ownership can be a great thing, or it can be a really terrible thing for people. We saw that in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, where people were losing their homes or had to move and their house wasn't worth what they owed on it, so big problems there. And a lot of people, and like people your age, saw their parents going through this, so that's a really difficult, like, that sets you up to think like real estate's scary, and so again, try to get a basis of like where people are at, what their future looks like. And then for Lauren and Evan, we set up a plan, which I like this as a plan for young people a lot. We decided they were going to buy a starter home. So we're going to find them the least expensive home in the nicest area that we can get, right? We want to make sure that whatever we pay for that home and whatever their mortgage is, they can rent that house for at least that much or more, right? Because they're young, things change. He's got a good job, again, with Coke, but maybe he gets an opportunity in Cincinnati, for a job that's going to take him to another place. This was 2 years ago, and my feeling was at that time even that, like, prices aren't going to keep going up forever, So if we have a pullback and then he gets that job offer, you can't be stuck, right? Like, that's the worst thing to be. Like, I can't take that job because I can't sell my house, or in order to take that job, I have to sell my house and bring money to the closing, to pay for all the costs and everything. So, we wanted to make sure that was set. We got them a nice place. It was good condition. They were willing to do some things. So, it wasn't a fixer upper, but, they went in and painted and put new floors in and did some things to the bathroom. And that's the other thing. Like, are you handy? Do you have friends that are handy? So we were discovering all of this while we're talking. He's got a big family with a lot of people that can do a lot of things. So, okay, easy. We can get a little bit of a fixer upper, but we made sure that mortgage payment was less than what they could rent it for. Okay. So that if they had to move and take that job, they could rent that house out and still be okay. Yeah. So the plan for them was to live in that house for a couple of years. While they're living there, save money up for another down payment, right? So in a couple of years, then they can move. Then they go and rent that house out, okay? So that house that they bought, for first-time home buyers, there's a lot of credits out there at the banks. And I think there's going to be more coming with the changes in real estate. It makes it a little bit harder for first-time home buyers. So I think there'll probably be some changes that help first-time home buyers in that scenario too. So buy that house, live in it, save money, right? And I'm big on, like, financially making sure that, like, you can definitely afford. I don't like people to stretch for their house, right? That's not a good situation. We want plenty of room, so again, talk about budget, finances, what kind of money do you make? How much money do you spend? Like, that's a whole conversation. So we figured that out for them. They can save enough. So their first home they bought with like 0% down,
Wow.
like with the credits that they got, they ended up actually getting a check at closing, right?
Wow.
So that can happen, especially for first-time home buyers, right? So they're not even into that house for any investment at all, right?
Wow.
And their mortgage payment's super low, all right? So they save money, 2-3 years, buy the next house. Okay, maybe this one's closer to Evan's work or closer to family, or it's just bigger. They have another kid, maybe. So now that shoebox house that they were perfectly happy in, all of a sudden, it becomes smaller after 3 years, right?
Right.
So, so that's where they're at right now. So they're preparing to buy another house, probably after the summer, like into next winter.
Wow.
Right. So then they buy that house. So again, they're starting at 22 years old. So you start at 24, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just say we're starting at 24. Buy that first house, live there for 3 years, rent that house out, buy the next one. Okay. Again, not your dream house. And that's what I think people need to know. Like, you're not going to get your dream house right away. This is a process. And I think a lot of young kids, even my generation, where we saw what our parents had when we were in high school and we thought, well, that's what they always started with.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of struggle that goes in between.